of us need to care about and should care about fashion and the sustainability of it, of course. We have an amazing panel of friends, and if you joined earlier, you would have seen us talking about things as normal friends would. Because guess what? We haven't caught up a lot this year. So this is how we are catching up. But they're friends, they're entrepreneurs, they are an inspiration to a lot of us and to a lot of people who've been fighting for sustainable fashion in this space. So I'm personally really looking forward to this discussion. What I would do is I'll take the next 2 minutes just to tell you a bit more about the Green Collective and to tell you about the Green Think Cut, why we are launching it and what do we actually do. And then I will pass it over to Anisa to kickstart the discussion for the session. Just some admin before I get into it. The whole session is around 1 hour, and you can ask your questions anytime during the session using the Q&A tab, which is in Zoom. Or for people who are on Facebook Live, you can also put it in the comments in Facebook Live, and we will be able to channel the questions into the session. So please ask questions, because that's one of the main things of doing these sessions, is to answer the queries that linger in your head and to bring it to people who are actually tackling these issues and get a response from them. So without further ado, I'll quickly tell you about the Green Collective and what is the Green Think Cut. So the Green Think Cut is our digital platform which we are launching. But before that, about the Green Collective. So the Green Collective was born out of a sheer frustration of us as social entrepreneurs of not being able to scale and not being able to survive as social entrepreneurs and the social enterprises that we were building, because there was a lack of ecosystem that existed and a lack of support when you actually kickstart your retail-focused social enterprise of sustainability-focused brand. And that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to act as an incubator, act as a pillar of support, where a community could get together under a compound, which is what we call ourselves, and the different brands, which we call the Green Kakis, get together and using a collective model or a cooperative model, try to scale the impact that we can do. So that's what we do. We have a retail presence in Funan, and now we are online as well. So you can go online, check out the website, which will talk about our communities. It will talk about all our Green Kakis or the brands which are part of our community. And of course, you can read and see different experiences like the webinars that we've been doing lately. So, and till 1st of September, for those of you who are joining us for this webinar, there is a discount. The discount should not drive you to buy things that you don't want. Please, let me make this very, very clear. We are proponents of impact via sustainability. Don't buy if you don't need it. And that should be at the base of consumption, because in Singapore, talking about sustainability, the conversation needs to start with cutting down the consumption first. So please keep that at the mind when you shop, whether at Green Collective or anywhere else. But that is at the core of what we want to do. We want to replace and we want to give you an alternate solution. But the idea is not to get you to buy more. So this is what we've been, this is the whole schedule for the launch. Actually, we've had discussions on different topics. You can actually catch hold of the sessions which have happened earlier on our Facebook page as well. Today, of course, like I mentioned, we are starting with a discussion on the power of consumer in fashion. And at 12 to 1, we'll be talking about one of the most talked about topics in Singapore and sustainability: plastic bags. Should we use the carrot or the stick? So do join us for those sessions, and 2 to 6 p.m. we will have our Green Kakis doing individual explanation of their sustainability journeys as brands. So you can join us, and that would be on IG Live. So with this, I will actually pass the screen, because there are no mics anymore. So I'll pass the screen to Anisa, who's been an inspiration to small brands working in sustainability as a lecturer in Raffles College, as well as running a brand of her own in sustainability. So Anisa, over to you to kickstart this discussion, and really looking forward to it.
Great, thanks, Maya. So first of all, good morning to everyone who took their time on a Saturday morning to come and listen to this incredible topic, and a thank you to the Green Collective for, bringing these issues to the fore again, and for inviting me to moderate a panel of people who I really respect, who have been change makers in their way, in their own sphere of sustainability. And that would be Ray Padditt, Chu Wong, and Susanna Jaffa. So I won't introduce them because I think they are better at sort of telling us about their sustainability journey and telling us what they do and who they are. So could I kick that off with Chu, maybe just introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm Chu. I'm founder of Shop Better, which is a sustainable fashion search engine that helps consumers find sustainable alternatives to their shopping needs. And I'm also the country coordinator of Fashion Revolution Singapore, which is the local chapter of the world's largest fashion activism movement. We're present in over 90 countries, and we advocate for a more transparent, sustainable, and ethical fashion industry. So that's what I do.
Great, thanks. Susanna?
Hi, everyone. My name is Susanna. I'm the founder of ZERRIN. ZERRIN is a media platform and multi-label store trying to make it sustainable fashion less complicated and more enjoyable. And yeah, that's what I do.
Ray?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. So my name is Ray, the founder of the Fashion Pulpit. So Fashion Pulpit is a swapping platform that aims to maximize the clothes that has been produced already. At the same time, lessen the textile waste, because being sustainable doesn't mean that you don't have to dress up. So what we would want is to provide an extension to your closet so you can always express yourself through the clothes that you are wearing without damaging the planet and your wallet.
Awesome. So it seems like we have it covered: an app, an e-commerce platform, and a store membership. That's excellent. Right, guys, just for the people who are listening, maybe tuning in for the first time, they're not really aware what sustainability is. What does fashion sustainability mean for you? And maybe, Susanna, you might want to kick that off.
Yeah, so sustainability to me means a sense of connectedness to things. In the context of fashion, I came to it as reassessing how I valued my clothes, my wardrobe. And that was a gateway for me for thinking more about where things came from, who was making my products, from what fabrics, materials. So yeah, it was really a heightened sense of awareness. Some people call it consciousness, and connectedness to both my wardrobe and the world around me. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else on the panel who'd like to jump in, add in?
Well, I'll jump in. So for me, sustainability, I mean, the definition of it is the ability to sustain or to exist constantly, right? And this covers both the environmental aspects that we're kind of associated the word with, as well as the social aspects. And I think consumption has a huge role in how we as citizens of this planet can contribute to this, because the way we consume anything, food, energy, water, clothing, entertainment, has a direct impact on what businesses offer us, right? So there's definitely a lot of things we can do in terms of sustainability and consumption, which is exactly what we're talking about today.
Okay.
I think for me, sustainability is simply a responsibility in terms of for businesses, not just to focus on profit, but put equal measure to the people and the planet to run the business. And as for the consumer, it's a responsibility to not just give your money to the businesses that you believe in, but also understanding the impact of the products that you're buying in terms of the environment and in the society as well.
Okay, so the key word I'm hearing is responsibility, whether it's a personal sort of experience with your own wardrobe and then thinking about the environment, which makes sense. Do you think in the context of the virus, that sense of responsibility has changed for individuals or the fashion industry? I mean, that's open to any of you to comment.
So I think if the pandemic has one silver lining for me personally, it's forced me to kind of slow down and focus, right? When we're all stuck at home, we begin to ask ourselves if there's really a need to own a wardrobe that is stuffed with clothing and has, it's just too much for us. And is that something that actually results in stress because maybe we can't find that one comfy basic tee that we want to work in today. And this doesn't just apply to clothing again, our consumption habits as a whole, right? I think we're realizing that we need much less than we think we do, and this is on the personal level. And I think on the corporate level, we've noticed that there are big brands canceling orders with their suppliers because we as consumers are no longer shopping, and then this results in mass redundancies, and that trickles down throughout the entire supply chain. So I think the pandemic I don't think it's changed our responsibility that much, but it has made us reflect upon it a lot more.
Agreed.
Yeah, just to add to Chu, agreed with your points, Chu, and also, yeah, I think it's on an industry level, it's really re-highlighted the excess of, the production scale of some of the big brands that we know, many of which have cancelled orders. By that, they've essentially refused to pay their workforces for orders that have already been placed, produced. So that's left a lot of garment workforces and factories in developing countries out of pocket, not able to pay their workers in an already strained, and that relationship from the social side of fashion is already very strained. There's a lot of exploitation, both wage and living exploitation within the fashion industry as a whole. So it's kind of exacerbated the whole situation. If you want to look up and find out more about that, you can look up a Remake and their Pay Up campaign, and you can kind of see the chronological history of what's been going on. At the same time, what brands still have been refusing to pay for orders. So that campaign was meant to highlight that for consumers like us to be made more aware of what's actually going on. And I think for me, that was a big thing and big realization, and something that we've been sharing through ZERRIN. A lot of people have been like, oh my gosh, these are brands that I buy, and I think that's been a bit of an awakening.
It's a really good point you raised, Susanna. I'd like to dig a bit further into that. I mean, maybe someone in the audience is thinking, well, the virus is not the fault of those brands. Why should those brands take responsibility? Why should consumers be thinking about brands taking responsibility? Any ideas? I
mean, I think that at the end of the day, it comes down to an intrinsic sense of morality. These are the brands that we're talking about that are largely highlighted, if I can use Remake's campaign as an example, Topshop, Primark, Next, a multitude of brand names that we all have grown up with, essentially. And they've been churning out product line after product line for years, and you would think that at the scale and volume they produce, that they would then, during a pandemic like this, they would look to supporting their workforces. To me, that makes business sense. And if I look at this cross section of the small independent brands that I work with, that was like number one priority. Are artisans safe? Even if work has to stop, which for the majority of people it did, can we send them some work at home to tide things over? A lot of people then switched to producing masks to help support them, even though that their fashion sales had potentially fallen or they weren't able to ship out. So I look at the contrast and I'm like, if these small independent emerging brands can value their workforce in this way, how on earth is it that these big established international brands, which we are essentially feeding as consumers with our money, how is it that they don't take that same sense of responsibility? And yeah, I mean, I personally found that quite a interesting contrast. And I just think it makes business sense, because at the end of the day, that it's not good for the reputation of the brand. I mean, this is all now highlighted over international press. And we shared on ZERRIN, you guys can look this up, there was a factory in Bangladesh that produced for Topshop, and it was highlighted by a lot of industry journalists. But basically, yeah, they had made all these jeans for Topshop and Burton, Topman as well. And some of it was actually their more sustainable line. that were made in this more responsibly run factory. And the guy who runs this factory, he's known for being a more responsible factory in Bangladesh. And yeah, it was just really shocking, you know, that these companies that are run by billionaires, essentially, just don't seem to value that relationship with the workforce that essentially creates the product that makes them profit. So this doesn't make business sense to me, and beyond that, it's just morally irresponsible. So
absolutely. So we have a responsibility as consumers then to choose the brands that are being more empathetic and finding solutions.
For sure, for sure.
Makes sense. Ray, any thoughts on the pandemic? Have you noticed anything? Did it change things with the Fashion Pulpit?
Right. I think what Susanna and Chu mentioned was really a summary of, I think, what we've seen as a change because of the pandemic. Susanna was highlighting the industry level change because of this pandemic. It just gives the highlight to the broken system in the fashion industry and what needs to be changed. And with Chu, the personal level, which we have seen so much, like after opening, after 3 months of being closed down because of circuit breaker, we have heard a lot of different stories of the realizations from our members. So it varies really from them having that time to declutter and to realize what they have been buying. At the same time, them buying, not necessarily using the items just because it was on sale or it was very convenient for them to click that specific item and delivered to their doorstep. And having that kind of experience and practice made them realize what's really important. And what Chu mentioned, everyone is realizing, especially that most of us are working from home. We don't need that much clothes. So there is that kind of realization where everyone we're able to identify what is important really now, and hopefully with that kind of realization it would continue and be able to sustain that realization, and not just in the fashion aspect but also throughout, you know, your consumption pattern.
Okay, that's interesting. Yes, it's all about our own personal realization, isn't it? And I think the virus reminded me too. I have too many things, even though I've been working in sustainability or thinking about the topic for over 15 years. We can all do a bit better. So really interesting that the Green Collective has these wonderful talks and webinars, and they've raised sustainability as an issue in terms of a broad issue. It's quite a complex issue. So I think that zero waste, BYO, has really come to the fore, hasn't it? As society in Singapore has really kind of embraced it and people are thinking about it. So it's like a hot topic. In terms of fashion, I don't think we're quite there yet. So 2 parts to my question is, you know, what's the low-hanging fruit for fashion brands? Maybe somebody is listening who has a fashion brand and is, you know, trying to explain to consumers why this is so important. A bit like, you know, bring your own straw, bring your own bottle, etc. So what's the low-hanging fruit for us in fashion? And I open that to anyone who wants to jump in. It's a tough question.
So I speak having been through this whole consumer journey myself, which is sort of the journey that led me up to eventually launching ZERRIN. But I think that one of the things that I trained myself to do was, in order to stop impulse purchasing or significantly reduce my impulse purchasing, I made a rule that I would never buy something that unless I truly knew I loved it. To assess that, I'd wait a week or 2 weeks until I actually bought the item. So if it was still on my mind, and now I do this as a general rule with everything, you know, like furniture, like anything basically, furniture, fashion, my whole lifestyle. If I'm still thinking about it, then it's probably a worthwhile purchase that I'm really going to love and use / wear for a really long time. That's a very basic thing, but it was really transformative for me in like my early 20s, when I was sort of at the peak of my, well, past the peak of my impulse fashion buying, which was sort of in my late teens. But yeah, I found that just a really basic, useful tip. And also Google to your friend, doing a bit of research on a brand before you buy into it. and finding out more about them, because I think a lot of us don't know where things come from when we're buying it, even like down to what fabric is actually made of and things like that. For example, I discovered that I had a little bit of an allergy to synthetic fabrics. I'd get little rashes when I moved to Singapore because it essentially is blocking, you know, sweat and body heat coming out of you. So it's kind of like this gross situation sometimes against your skin. And I realized that a lot of the dresses that I had were made from polyester. And for me, that wasn't a great fabric for me. So after I'd done that research, I was like, okay, a lot of my fast fashion clothes are made of polyester. I realized they made it because it's cheaper. So then I started to reduce the amount of fabric that I bought that way and look for more natural options, which were better for my skin. So a bit of research, yeah.
Getting consumer to pause. Okay.
So I think for me, one of my favorite quotes in the sustainable fashion world is buy less, choose well, and make it last, right? So I think it's really important, like Mayura mentioned earlier, for us to first reduce our consumption, because that would directly reduce the strain on our natural resources. But of course, I'm not advocating for a shopping ban by any means. Like what Susanna said, you can just really think very carefully before you make your purchase, right? But once you've reduced your purchase, I think the next step to think about is what really matters to you, right? Is it the people who make our clothing? Do we want to make sure that they are paid fairly and, you know, work in a safe environment? Is it the environment, for example? Do we want to make sure that we no longer wear clothes that are made from plastic, which, you know, profits the oil and gas industry? Or is it the animals? Do we want to make sure that the clothes that we wear don't contain animal products? So I think we as consumers have to start with whatever value that matters to us, and then we hold on to that value and we live by it. And like Susanna mentioned, you start asking, start researching, and then asking the brands that you currently shop at about their practices, right? Like I think if you're shopping at Topshop now, start asking them, you know, what is it that you do, and does that align with my values? And if they don't align with my values, then I'm going to start searching for brands that do. And another alternative I love is swapping and pre-love, but Ray will tell you more about that. And, you know, I think another thing is also to look into extending the lifespan of your clothing, right? Learn how to do really simple fixes, you know, loose buttons, split seams, hems. And I find personally that darning has been extremely useful for my socks. So I think it's a great skill to have.
Great. So look for values that align with you personally. Okay. Ray, anything to add?
I think for businesses, I think I would say, because there's no specific answer to really give them a head start in the journey of sustainability. It's really just because different businesses has different focus in terms of what area they would want to be sustainable, because in reality there's no business yet that it's 100% sustainable. So in relation to what Chumin said, with the consumer knowing their values, it's also the same thing with the businesses. It's also identifying the value that they would want to fight for, and they can focus with that, and that's where the education comes about. I mean, now it's a bit tricky because every brand has different specific value that they stand for. So every consumer needs to go to different, you know, brands for them to understand what's happening and what are the solutions that they can take in terms of like living a more sustainable lifestyle. But it is what it is now. But I would say for the brands, just focus on that specific one and really be good at it, and the information that the consumer needs to know, that could be like a one way and a good step for us to start.
That's great. That's a good reminder as consumers. What we purchase actually, the brands we support affects essentially their value system. So if I support Topshop, then that means I'm kind of agreeing with Topshop, right? If I'm buying from, I don't know, a luxury brand, that means I'm agreeing with the value system of a luxury brand. That's interesting. Okay, so my next question is for Chu, who's from Singapore, right? From Singapore, Chu?
Yes, I'm local.
So that's aimed at you. So Singapore is extremely temperate. We don't have monsoons and earthquakes. Well, yay, thank goodness. I'm in the audience and thinking, hey, look, why should I care? I'm from Singapore. Why should I care about sustainability and the environment? The environment's fine. What would you say?
Yeah, I think this question really resonates with me because it's something that I get asked very, very regularly from my family, from my friends. I mean, I grew up here, right? So my answer to that is, Singapore is an island nation, right? So when ice sheets melt due to, warming, the warming world and sea levels rise, we in Singapore will definitely be affected, right? And the average sea level today has already risen, from the pre-1970s level, and this will only accelerate. And in fact, the Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong has called it a life and death matter in last year's National Day rally speech, and announced that 100 billion Sing dollars or more could be spent on climate change adaptation and rising sea level. This is how serious the problem is. And we all remember the floods that have been happening after heavy rains in the recent years. I grew up in Singapore and that was not the case when I was a kid, but it has been happening increasingly. And this is really due to a climate phenomenon that is known as rain bombs or sudden bursts of rain that Singapore has been experiencing and will continue experiencing more in a warming world, right? And other risks and consequences of the climate change include, more extreme weather, which means hotter days. And I think Singapore's pretty hot as it is, so I don't think we actually want any hotter days here. New diseases, food shortages, which is a terrible thing for Singapore because we kind of pride ourselves as a foodie nation. So if no country wants to export their food to us anymore, we have no more foodie nation. And, but also on the side, like we are citizens of this planet, right? So our generation is the last that can prevent catastrophic global warming and the first to be suffering its impact. So I really think that we have a responsibility to care and do something about it while we can. Yeah.
Okay, that's so true. And us buying stuff leads to what? Transporting goods, which leads to
precisely.
Leads to warming. Okay. Wow, that's food for thought, isn't it? Should I buy that nice top? Maybe not. This next question is for Ray. So you basically run the Fashion Pulpit, which just opened its doors after the phase 2, and it's at Marina 1, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, it is.
And thanks for sharing with us. A lot of people have been clearing their wardrobes, etc. And suddenly, people are rethinking the amount of clothes they have. Can you tell us a little bit about the past few years? How many tons of clothing have been swapped and saved from landfill?
Right. So I wish I could answer your question in tons.
Okay.
That we could have measured it since day one, but unfortunately we were basing on pieces of items that we have collected.
Fine.
So I'm sure moving forward, because that's tons is a generic communication to everyone to understand the impacts that you are creating and the savings. So I think we will move to that direction. But as for now, we have measured it through pieces. So when we opened 2 years, exactly 2 years ago, we have now saved about 70,000 clothes from the landfill. So that's how crazy it is, how much items we've owned. I mean, it's also a good thing to see that these pieces are not thrown away into the landfill, but it is circulating among the community and maximizing really the use of it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that. So then seeing these clothes, because I guess you guys have to, manage them, create inventory, etc. What are the Singaporean ladies, and maybe not Singaporeans, the residents, let's say, favorite brands? And then are they, I mean, don't mention any brands in particular, but are there any issues that you see?
Right. Yeah. So really the beauty in Singapore as well, because it's very international. It's not just like your Singaporean lady. It's also everyone who is working or staying here in Singapore. So there's really a mix of brands, from your discount brands to your affordable luxury. We have yet to receive luxury brand, the high luxury one, but it's really a mix. And what the good thing is you get to have a chance to have a sneak peek of what fashion is in other countries, because people are bringing it to the Fashion Pulpit, and you have that opportunity to swap it. So that has been the good side of swapping in this kind of market. I think there's a lot of issues that we encounter since we have started, but I think the main highlight is really understanding that in the past 2 decades, we're living in the fast fashion era, and fast fashion clothes are really not built to last longer. So in order for us to build a healthy ecosystem of the items that we circulate in the community. We really need to see and find quality items so it can stay longer in the system. But again, because of the era that we're living in, it's not most of the clothes that, as much as we would want to extend their lifespan, it's not just visible because they're no longer functional or presentable. So that has been one of the challenge that we're seeing, and thinking of what we can do, having as a DNA of the brand is really to maximize every piece, and having this kind of problem. The big thing is like, what can we do next after a piece is no longer functional or presentable to be swapped? So I guess among all other challenges that we see every day, that's one thing that has always been what's in our mind, and how we can really provide a solution to that.
Okay, so we're in the era of fast fashion. I see. Now we have evidence as well in Singapore. So that's a perfect segue for a question I have for Chu. Can you share the other tangible problems? Maybe can you unpack a bit, because you work with Fashion Revolution, you lead the chapter here in Singapore. So that model, why is it really so bad for the society and the environment?
So the fast fashion business is good for business, right? Because when the items are so cheaply, and they're so cheaply because they're also produced cheaply, more items are sold because both the price is attractive and also because lower quality items often, as Ray mentioned, give way faster. And this means more revenue is coming in for the fast fashion brands. For the consumers, I think the problem is that we get a very false sense of a good deal. You know, when you buy a t-shirt at $10, like, yes, I managed to buy something for a good price. But if you think about it, if the shirt doesn't last you long and you got to buy it once every month, because it doesn't survive 4 washes, for example, then you're really looking at $10 times 12 in a year, right? And that's $120. And this is then contrasted against if you were to buy one really good t-shirt, maybe at $40, $50, that will last you 3 years or longer, right? So I think we get a false sense of a good deal, and that's a problem. Another thing I think as a consumer is a problem. If you really like the item you bought, wouldn't you be really sad that if, like, after you washed it, the seams started twisting or it no longer fits right? Or if the color starts fading after a few washes? I don't think that's something that clothing is supposed to do, and especially not if you follow their recommended care instructions. And then I think we look at the bigger picture, then we've got the planet and the people, right? And for the planet, this is a huge problem, fast fashion, because in order to produce every single piece of clothing, we do 2 things, right? We extract natural resources, that's the water and nutrients from the soil for plant-based fabrics like cotton, there's oil for synthetic fabrics like polyester. And the second thing we do is we generate greenhouse gases through running the factories, processing the products, transporting the items. And if we did this slowly, I think nature can heal our planet such that these actions are aligned. But right now, with what we call 52 collections a year or 1 collection every week, we are definitely reaching the limits of what nature can do. And on top of that, we keep dumping these relatively new products made from freshly extracted resources back into the soil because they're no longer trendy. And then we're leaving them to take up space in a limited landfill, to off-gas toxic chemicals, to leach into our waters. It's just not the smartest move for our own future as humans on this planet. And then we move on to the people, and I think the fact that clothing is so cheap is in and of itself not the problem. I think there are 2 issues with it. It's one, we as humans, we tend to value items that are priced cheap less. And I think that leads to us thinking that fashion is disposable, and that again affects the planet. And the second thing is that if clothing is so cheap and the businesses that sell them have to make a profit, then that means the production of the clothing is definitely much cheaper, right? And what this often means is that they cut corners when they are building the factory, for example, to save costs, and this leads to unsafe buildings. This means poverty wages, which doesn't allow the makers of the clothing to cover their cost of living, much less escape the poverty cycle. This means that children are more likely to be asked to work to provide to the household income instead of improving their prospects by going to school. It means that cheap materials are used, often meaning that health and safety hazards are ignored. Cheaper toxic chemicals are used, environmental regulations are not followed, etc., etc. So I think these are the real or the tangible problems with this buy cheap, throw fast kind of model that we have.
I see. Thanks for that, going into details in that. So on the other spectrum, this is a question for Susanna. because kind of Susanna has tried to come up with a solution, right, for fast fashion, which is better brands or better made brands or sustainable brands. And Susanna runs ZERRIN.com, where you can find lots of different sustainable brands. So can you tell us, I'm not allowed to use this word in sustainability, but I'm going to anyway, the trends in sustainable fashion. What brands should we be looking for? What are the cool things? Let's be honest, we do all want new, nice, interesting things that don't affect the planet.
Sure, and I was just looking through the Q&A, and I think this kind of addresses one attendee's question, or even two. Is it possible to evaluate our shopping basket based on the type of clothing you buy? Oh wait, Mayo said he's going to answer that question live.
Yes.
So yeah, no worries about that. So at ZERRIN, just to give the context, at ZERRIN we basically curate a multitude of different sustainable fashion, beauty, jewelry brands on one platform, and we vet those brands against a set of our in-house values, as it were, from more considered fabrics to using upcycling techniques to fair trade, fair made, cruelty-free, etc. So I think in terms of, like you say, the word trends, it's not generally a word that we use in the industry. Yeah. We're trying to move away from trends, but I think that if I want to talk about over the COVID period, there was actually on our side an uptake of self-care products, from skincare to ironically also jewelry, I think, because of Zoom calls and everyone's seeing everything from the top up, and of our capsule wardrobe basics have always been really popular, but it's really a mix. We carry such a mix of labels that I feel we've tried to curate something for every fashion taste. I came to, one of the things that got me into ZERRIN was actually realizing, wow, there's all these labels out there that mean I don't have to sacrifice my sense of style. I came from a former fashion, beauty editor, media background. So that was, and I've always been passionate about the space. So that was a big thing for me. And a big wake up call that, wow, like I can actually, blend sustainability and style, but still have more of a substance behind what I'm buying. And I felt like I looked beyond trends, as it were, when I was purchasing an item. There's always such a mix of designs that sell on the site. It's quite difficult to pinpoint. As of recently, we've been selling a lot of jewelry, earrings in the last couple of weeks. So that's interesting. But yeah, I mean, as a platform, we're very, in the ethos where we don't want people to buy what they don't need or don't love. So we're not very big in contrast to other platforms, other multi-label platforms that are more, you could say, fast fashion focused and very sale and discount driven. We don't operate in that area. We don't do that. So
Susanna, I was just trying to point out the question to you, actually. It's just the Zoom settings that it shows that Mayur's answer. But please go ahead. I think that question, I just wanted to point out.
Yeah, balancing style, discovery, and sustainability. I think it's, okay, so speaking from a consumer's perspective, I think one of the key things that the fashion industry does as women is it actually makes us feel, it thrives off making us feel like we need more, that we're less than, that buying this next dress, this next piece, this buying into this next trend will actually improve us in some way. And I think breaking out of that and realizing that we actually don't need those material things to make us happy, but on the other hand, when you do find those pieces that you really love, it's such a beautiful thing and you're going to value it more, wear it more. That's the journey that I and so many of my customers have been going on. And as a platform, if I can use ZERRIN as an example, as a platform, we're trying to kind of blend that discovery so that you can go and discover brands. You can research brands online through Google, through platforms like Shop Better, through platforms like ZERRIN. There's apps like Good On You as well. you can actually look for alternatives to the kind of style that you like. So if you're a minimal dresser, if you love prints, if you love, you know, if you love activewear, there's so much out there now that is an alternative for you. That looks just as great as anything that I could find in a fast fashion store. Yes, more expensive, but I think as Chu has sort of highlighted, it's very hard to replicate the cost of fast fashion, for smaller brands, because fast fashion brands produce at such, you know, eye-watering volumes. Like you can, you know, thousands and thousands of pieces of one garment, a lot of which will end up as textile waste. And on the other hand, it's also, there's a lot of hidden costs in fashion that we are, as consumers, not aware of, and that brands aren't communicating to us. So therefore, at the end of the day, who pays that cost? It's the environment, it's the people that are impacted the most. So what sustainable fashion and brands are really doing are they're factoring that cost into the end product as a fair price. So they're paying fair wages. They are using more high quality fabrics, which then ups the price of the end product. So I then looked into to switch my own mindset as a consumer. I looked at what I was investing in, what I would get the most wear out of, what I would love the longest. And I found that actually by consuming in this way, I've ironically spent far less than I would if I was impulse shopping or fast fashion buying, or not thinking yet in this mode, because I've bought less pieces that I really love, or, you know, swapped pieces at the Fashion Pulpit when I've been, and, you know, it's, yeah, I think it's been such an enriching journey for myself. And that's what we try and help other women go down, that kind of journey of discovery at ZERRIN too, not just through the e-commerce brands, but also through the content that we write, resources, guides, for people who are just getting into the space or are familiar with sustainable fashion.
Excellent. And of course, there are many sustainable fashion brands at the Green Collective, level 2 Funan as well. Or you can swap.
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you for that. So this is, maybe Chu or Ray wants to jump in. In terms of consumers, do you have any hacks, you know, to challenge behavior or to help change behavior? Any kind of advice? If we really want to change, but we don't know what to. Susanna mentioned a few.
So I think I'll just jump in real quick. I think conscious consumption is a mindset and a lifestyle change, like Susanna mentions, right? And it goes beyond fashion. It's really about how we view our role in this society and on this planet. And that can extend to food, travel, fashion, so much. But the thing is, it really starts with us. And so I think a good step for fashion is to learn to fall in love with your clothes again, right? To really just look at your relationship with your clothing as long-term relationships and not flings, you know, like shop your wardrobe, relive that moment of every piece when you fell in love with them and actually first bought them. And for me, this has helped me realize that I hardly ever, you know, need or even want to buy anything new. And that my wardrobe is really more than enough. But when I do feel like buying something new, I think I do exactly the same as what Susanna does. I put that item on like a mental list for a while and wait like 2 weeks before I really buy it, because that means it's really something I want instead of something that I feel I want in that spur of the moment. So that's helped me a lot.
Ray, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think going back to all the discussion about the sustainable fashion, it's really, I think, in this generation, because not everyone is an activist and would put so much time to discover what's happening in the fashion industry. And with that understanding, you're able to empower yourself to create or make a wiser decision in terms of what you will be buying. So everyone has not had that kind of opportunity for you to explore. But I guess having said that, like, I think the first thing that I would go for us to have that kind of consciousness, at the same time awareness of like what we need is really understanding the kind of lifestyle that you live in. So if with that kind of understanding, you'll be able to see what are the things that you need in terms of like what are the fashion styles that I should be investing in. So I would be able to use it for a while, not just like because it's a trend or I want to post that on my social media. So I think having that kind of understanding with that lifestyle, you would be able to identify which brands or which fashion platform or services that you can actually support or be in for you to sustain that kind of lifestyle. And have that kind of awareness with the lifestyle and engaging with the brand that is fulfilling what lifestyle is that. Hopefully that brings an education part of what else is happening in the industry and be able to empower yourself next time if you're adjusting, and also knowing what other solutions that you can do aside from like that step one that you already did.
Okay, great. So just to quickly summarize, we are basically having to mindset change, and then we think about investment long-term, right? The relationship with our clothes. That's excellent. So my final question then, and Ray said not everybody wants to be a, you know, to sort of fight for change, but maybe there are some people in the chat who are wanting to impact brands. What can they do? You know, if they want to impact brands, they want to call out brands in a nice, positive way. What can they do? And that can be from anyone in the panel.
I'll just quickly jump in because this is something that we do a lot at Fashion Revolution. So I think a good starting point for consumers is really just to be curious and to ask brands questions, right? Start a conversation with these brands with a genuine interest to know more about what they're doing. And I think I would love for all of us to kind of withhold judgment, but to kind of criticize lovingly if these brands don't match up to your expectations. I think that's what we really encourage consumers to do.
Awesome. Any Susanna or Ray?
Agreed with you.
Yeah, I think for me on how we can encourage brands to be more sustainable, I think it all boils down to what curiosity is, what you mentioned, but also identifying that there is that big hindrance or roadblock in terms of the consumer to jump into that, because again, mentioned before that we did not ask for this. The system in the fashion industry now, especially in the 2 decades of, if you've grown up in this decade, 2 decades, you probably is not aware of what an organic cotton is versus what polyester is, because you are just presented with that option. So it's hard to really break that kind of habit of what you're buying. But I think it's the role of the brand as well to really educate the different types of, you know, materials and the impacts of it, and the transparency and understanding the whole supply chain. And just is where the educating part really comes along, because if we don't know what we're trying to change, it becomes like very superficial, and people would tend to jump into something that is trendy and not really realizing the reason behind it. But having that kind of a strong foundation of realizing or knowing what we're trying to change, it would only help us question more and be intentional, I would say, in terms of providing in different solutions. Because what's happening right now, I would hate to be the bad news barrier for in a Saturday morning, but we're actually the generation that is going to pay the high price of being inconvenient and uncomfortable in terms of fighting this sustainability and really push the needle faster. Because again, we're born with this, but it's not our fault to be in this era, but it becomes our fault if we don't do something about it. So it is for us to really push the brands to question more of what we need, because we cannot overemphasize the power of your dollar. of where you're putting it, it means that, again, that's the kind of future that you would want to see. So realizing, like, even if you, like, again, a consumer who doesn't want to put so much time in understanding what's happening in the sustainability work, all the climate change, but just realizing where you're putting your money is already a big part for you to take in that whole conversation of what the kind of future we would want to see.
Absolutely. Great. That was an excellent place to end. That's so true. Educating yourself and knowing what the heck you're fighting for. So on that note, I can see a lot of questions going on in the chat, a lot of pings. I'll pass on to Maya to handle the Q&A from the floor.
Definitely. Thanks a lot, Anisa. And we have a lot of questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine some of them. And we have 10 minutes to go. So let me combine in terms of people who are asking questions. Some of them we know, of course. Adele, thanks for being here. Guys, I'm just going to put it 3 of you or 4 of you actually. And the 2 questions that Adele is asking. One is related to COVID and the behavioral change that has happened. And I think at different points, all 3 of you addressed this issue about the lack of understanding of social impact and the crisis that is going on in the fashion industry. And I think, Susanna, you talked about it in depth. What Adele is saying is that crises like these actually seem to intensify selfishness, in which basically people think too much about themselves and rather the planet, because kind of a me comes first basis. So how do you guys think about this, and how do you guys see this impacting the wave for sustainable fashion in particular? Maybe let's start with that. Anyone wants to take it?
I'll just quickly answer the question. I think it differs from society to society. I remember reading a report fairly recently, I think it was from McKinsey, about exactly this question about people becoming more selfish or less selfish during a pandemic. And what it's found is that it differs from country to country. So apparently, and where was it? I think it was UK and Germany has actually become less selfish and more interested in sustainability during the pandemic, whereas I think it was Brazil and I think India that kind of shifted towards being less sustainable, right? So I think it differs from country to country. Unfortunately, Singapore wasn't on that report, but I think my personal experience in Singapore so far in the pandemic is actually, I feel that people have become more interested in the topic of sustainability. I've got friends who were previously just not interested in the topic at all, start texting me questions about sustainability during the pandemic. And so I feel that in general in Singapore, we are maybe becoming a little bit more interested in the topic because we are forced to kind of slow down and focus and think about our habits during the whole lockdown.
And worldwide, there was an increase in searches for sustainable fashion and sustainability in general. Pandemic.
Cool. Let me move to the next question, and this is an interesting one, and I would love to know answers on this. And I'll actually put it to Ray. Ray, this is a question from Shraddha, and she's asking, how can you apply minimalism aspects in sustainable fashion? And it's, I think, on the lines of what Susanna answered earlier about mixing style with sustainability.
Ray is the perfect person for this question. He has
that's why. Exactly. There's a reason I'm putting this to you.
Ray is a minimalist.
Minimalist. Yeah, I think minimalism goes hand in hand on being sustainable, because the main ethos of minimalism is actually keeping what's necessary, and it's automatically a sustainable way for you to sustain that kind of lifestyle. But I get it. It's not for everyone that, who enjoys dressing up. But again, there's always different alternative ways for you to address that urge to dress up. So what is good thing in Singapore, there's a lot of alternatives now. There's like rental, you can swap. There's a lot of thrift online now that are coming up because everyone is becoming interested with a secondhand. So that's a good thing. You can still, in a way, be minimal in terms of your choices, but not limited to, have that in in 1 year, because you can always change that through different services and platforms. If you're into, you know, like at some point 1 month you're into black and white, and then the next month you would want to have prints, but because of this alternative that is popping up in Singapore, you have that chance to do it. So I think minimalism should also change in a way of how we define it, that you need to stick to that style for the longest time, but actually maybe it can be for that specific moment of your you know, of your mood, of whatever it is, that you can still fulfill that, but having that kind of options makes you also be responsible in those choices.
Thanks a lot, Ray. I think I love that. Susan, I'll put the next set of questions to you. This is a common stream of questions that we've seen across sessions. I'm combining a bunch of questions, but this is largely around labeling, certifications, the validity of them, and the good old argument of large brand opening a conscious collection. So to frame the question, how I would put it is basically, what are the labels that you can rely on? If you can, then how do you rely on that? Labels, I mean certifications as well. And how do I do as a consumer? How do I make my decision if H&M or a Zara or anyone else launches a conscious clothing brand and is something that I have been shopping with for a long time? Should I just stick to that? How do I make that decision? Maybe Susanna, you can start on it, and Chu, I think it'll be good for you to continue on that and talk a bit more about the work with Shop Better.
So labels people can rely on. So it's a tough one. There's two parts of this. On the one hand, there are labels for things like, you know, brands that are claiming that they're using better fabrics. There are specific certification bodies that are certifying these fabrics, for example, Ecotex, for example, BCI, which is a Better Cotton Initiative, Cotton. There's a whole host of certifications that you can actually look at, and if a brand is using that, they should really be communicating that through their platforms. And if I'm looking at the spectrum of brands that I know that are out there, they are generally doing so through their marketing on the websites. And I saw someone also talking about cruelty-free. Yes, there are cruelty-free certifications as Leaping Bunny. There is, of course, PETA as well. I think PETA also has their own certification. And there's also organic certifications for beauty, ACO, USDA certified ingredients. So there are definitely certifications you can look at. However, when it comes to smaller ethical labels, not all of them have these certifications, but they are using these practices. This is because a lot of certifications, official certifications, are extremely expensive for a small brand. I'll give an example of a beauty brand. They may have all of their USDA, all of their ingredients USDA certified. However, the end product, which is possibly a blend of 11 of those different ingredients, that end product needs further certifying. And imagine if you have a range of 10, 11 different products, the cost is just huge for a big brand. It's going into the thousands. So some of them don't have that end symbol on the final bottle, even though they are actually sourcing from certified responsible sources. If you have any doubt, I would simply, you know, it's been a running theme here, reach out to the brand, ask questions, and brands that are worth their salt will answer you transparently and honestly, in my opinion. And at ZERRIN, we started something called Better Brand Mark, which actually we were looking at all of these different certifications and certifying bodies and organizations worldwide when we were looking at a brand's practices. So we've tried tried to kind of filter down and make it easier for people to see, oh, these brands are actually looking and doing all of these things too. But reaching out, simple research, I think is key there, and not just writing off a brand because you don't see that symbol or that end symbol. On the other hand, and on the flip side, then there's greenwashing when brands are saying things that they're doing and they're not doing, but that's a whole other topic. Please look up the word greenwashing. We'll talk about it another time. The next thing, I'll quickly go into it. Chu will continue. Someone asked about, biggest challenges for brands to be sustainable. Doesn't H&M have an ethical fashion range? Should you continue shopping at these kind of companies? So yes, if we're talking about the brand openly here, for example, H&M has made huge strides in sustainability, and they have invested in it hugely as a company, and that is not to be ignored. One of the reasons why big fast fashion brands are doing this is just exactly because of everything we've been talking about. The public have been pushing brands. There has been a kickback. There has been, an increased consumer interest in knowing where things are coming from and what they are actually, the amount of waste these companies are creating. That's the power of social media, really, and kind of waking us all up and making us hyper connected towards these issues. I would say, I think it's great that H&M have their conscious collection and a range, and I think we need more brands stepping into this. However, I would also, when you are looking at supporting a company, I would look at their business model as a whole, and I would look at the areas which you want to support and the areas, but also be very aware of the areas that they are lacking in. So, I mean, someone said to me the other day, likening, celebrating H&M's conscious collection is like celebrating McDonald's for offering a chicken salad. It made me laugh. But on the one hand, yes, they are still a fast fashion company. They had, billions of dollars of unsold stock and textile waste in 2018. They have a huge proportion of their profits is produced still off fast fashion. Their conscious collection probably only counts them for a small percentage of their business. However, I think it's encouraging if we as consumers say that we want more of this to these brands in order for them to continue innovating, changing their supply chains, improving what they do. So yeah, I'll let you carry that on because I think there's more insights to say. I'm not saying there's a lot of, I don't support fast fashion, but I also understand from a budget perspective, not everyone can afford other alternatives, which is why there's thrifting, secondhand, swapping. There's so many alternatives out there. So yeah, Chu, carry it on. I'm going to start rambling in a minute.
I exactly like Susanna. I think we are all huge nerds when it comes to sustainable fashion. And I think it's quite scary as a consumer exploring sustainable fashion because there's a lot of jargon in the industry, just not even on the certification level. We're just talking about what is sustainable fashion versus slow fashion versus ethical fashion versus vegan fashion, organic fashion, whatever. And I think that's very scary for a consumer because you're like, what exactly am I looking out for, right? And then you dig deeper and then you learn about these certifications. Oh, there's Soil Association, there's GOTS, there's BCI, like Susanna mentioned. What the hell do these words mean and do these letters mean, right? And so I think the corporates are pulling a lot of responsibility on us as consumers to understand certifications and the kind of research. And like Ray said earlier, sometimes we as consumers just really don't have the time and resources to do that. So I think ZERRIN has mentioned they've got the Better Brand initiatives that they've got. And at Shop Better, what we do is we actually pre-vet our brands before onboarding them. And Shop Better is a sustainable fashion search engine, right? So what we do is we don't just go to their website to kind of figure out how sustainable they are or what values they have. We actually have them go through our sustainability framework and answer a pretty comprehensive questionnaire, as I got feedback from my brand partners, with regards to what exactly they stand for. Do they stand for transparency? They stand for being, earth-friendly, people-friendly, or animal-friendly. Those are what we call our better values. And what we're trying to do here is really to simplify the jargon in sustainable fashion so that people can look for items that resonate with them, that align with their values in a way that's not intimidating, right? I think when you go to Shop Better, if you care about the earth, do you necessarily have to start looking for brands that are GOTS certified? Maybe you're looking for brands that care about the earth in a way that they are, for example, looking at a made-to-order business model instead. So they are reducing their strain on earth resources by only creating what is needed. So that's what we do. And with regards to fast fashion brands exploring conscious collections, I think there are a lot on the bandwagon now. H&M was one that was mentioned. I think H&M, like Susanna has mentioned, is doing a great job when it comes to research and development. I think when it comes to fabric technology, they're really investing very heavily in that. And that kind of looks towards more of the environmental aspects of sustainable fashion. But we really have to consider what the business model is that they are implementing. And if their conscious collection is made in an environmentally friendly way, is it made in a human friendly way? Is it something that we still stand for? I think that's something that we as consumers have to kind of ask ourselves. If we, for example, for some reason don't really care about the human aspect of fashion, then maybe the conscious collection is something for you. But I personally really care about sustainable fashion as a whole, and that for me includes both the environmental and the human aspect. And so I really kind of look for brands that resonate with my values.
Thanks a lot for that, Chu. We're running over time, which always happens in these conversations because they get so interesting. I'll tackle one last question because that's very interesting, and it's a good one to wrap the whole session up with. What about yourself? How do you shop now? Do you still buy fashion? And this has come from FB Live. So, Ray, I'm going to start with you again because I know it will be a short answer with you.
Yeah, I think for the past few years, shopping has not been my thing anymore because what I do is like I wear the same thing every day, and I invest on it as well. So I have it custom made, so I don't have a problem of like in terms of fitting. So and whenever I buy, that is, I put so much time to knowing what the brand is all about, and it's something that I believe in. Then that's where I decide where can I buy it. But now that's how I usually I'm a big believer of like custom made because again it just creates so much engagement and relationship towards your clothes, and I think that's something that we lose touch of it because clothes has become very much utilitarian now. Like it's just very about the transaction, but with the bespoke, it creates that kind of engagement, and you tend to value it more because you know you spend so much resources to it and time to get that item.
Susanna, Chu, quick
Yes,
last words.
You go first.
I'm an example of someone who does a bit of everything, to be perfectly honest. I invest in the things that I really want to wear, I love, and know I'm going to wear again. Just going back quickly to the concept of minimalism, I definitely own less clothes now, but I could never be a minimalist because I love prints. One day I love prints, one day I love to be wearing like an all black dress. So I think minimalism can be adapted to suit whatever your style is, even that means that you own less. And for other things, I love swapping. If I need to, you know, if I had an evening out or a special event, I'll rent a dress because I know that I'm not going to wear it more than once. Looking at my past habits, I try and utilize all of the options available to me. And I think for me, that keeps fashion fun. I can dip into a trend if I want to through the Fashion Pulpit or through like Rentadella, which is a rental company here. And I can still own the pieces that I love and, you know, truly want to wear again and again. There's so many options out there, so go explore them.
So for me, I definitely echo what Susanna just said. I think what's also very important when we explore sustainable fashion is, I think Ramos mentioned this earlier, is to really know your style or your lifestyle, right? So if you know what you are looking for, it's easier to find it. So exactly like Susanna, I do a bit of everything. I regularly shop at the Fashion Pulpit. I buy pre-loved on Carousel and whatnot. And when I don't find it at these options, then I search out for that item, right? For example, on Shop Better, we've got filters for your budget, your style, your values. And if I see something I like, what I do is I kind of, like we mentioned earlier, put it on a mental list for a week or two. And then when we are still really thinking about it, then we look at purchasing it. And I think with all these alternatives available out there in sustainable fashion. It's really accessible at every price point. I think very often people think sustainable fashion is expensive or ugly. That maybe was the case 20 years ago or something, but it's really not the case now. There's really an option for everyone and every price point. So yeah, if you've got any questions about this, feel free to hit any of us up because we've got all the options for you.
Thanks, Shu. And I mean, last but not the least, Anissa, can we have the closing statement on the session as well as this question, which kind of sums it up, right? At the end of the day, it's individual decision-making focus on how do I make decisions on a day-to-day basis for fashion, and what about you, your personal habits? And then we can wrap the session based on that.
Okay, I have to keep it short. I wish I was more like Ray. That's what I say. My personal habits are, I've been in the industry long years. And so, yeah, sustainability came on this, on my vision, on my horizon since the 90s. So we sell, I mean, there's a difference between retail and fashion. When it comes to fashion, I actually buy into luxury. And that's something we forget, that luxury brands are better made, not for the brand name, but for the quality of the materials. And I have garments that are 30 years old, 20 years old. That shows how old I am, doesn't it? So better made luxury brands, better made clothing. And I do try to support sustainable brands as much as possible in Singapore. Unfortunately, they don't have my size or my style, because as I said, I'm part of the fashion industry, as it were. And styling is an issue here. So I buy a lot of accessories from sustainable brands here in Singapore, a lot of sort of jewelry, because that fits my style. And I have bought fast fashion, but of course I know what I'm buying. I look at the label, and that some of my fast fashion garments have been with me 10, 15 years. So again, my closing statement would be think about what you're buying, and a lot of what the panelists said today, educate yourself and understand a bit more about materiality and your connection with fashion. But it's really been such a pleasure to hear from our three panelists who are the real change makers out there. So thank you for inviting me.
No, thanks for being here, guys. And what I loved is almost everyone at some point of the time or the other said, hit us up, ask the question. And that's what I would like to end this session with. The whole purpose of us as small sustainable brands is to be more responsible. When you have questions, please ask us. I'm sorry we could not address all of the questions. We'll try to see if we can later on address it in the Facebook Live and put it as comments over there. We'll try to do that. But for those of you who are interested, in another 20 minutes, we are starting a session on plastic bag, whether it's a carrot or stick approach, where we'll be talking about the plastic waste issue in Singapore. So if you have the time, please join us for that. Thanks to all of you for joining this. I think it was a great discussion. And thanks to all the attendees for coming on a Saturday morning. So here's wishing you guys a great weekend. And thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.